So with the songwriting thing, we just did a songwriting session lesson with Erin, and it was very helpful, and it was very eye-opening and amazing.
Well, y'all didn't need much, like, y'all's songs were, like, they were totally, I just added a couple of production notes, really.
That's what we need, you know? It was fantastic. But, so, when you sit down to write a song, not with the band, not anything, I've talked to a lot of songwriters, and they break their projects down into chord progressions, melody, and lyrics. After working with you and hearing you speak in this interview, I definitely see things deeper than that. What is your process for writing songs?
So, it definitely varies from song to song, because I know that sometimes I've just gotten a whole song stuck in my head, and it's like you sit down and it just, there's a song.
Yeah.
But that's, that doesn't happen all the time. A lot of times it's like, here's a third of a song.
Right.
And I keep extensive notes. I write things down. Now that I have an iPhone, like, I, use notes, and they're just full. And also, my voice recordings are full of just, like, guitar riffs that I've sung into them, and like, parking lots and things like that.
Right on.
And so I'll have these little, like, scraps. So I'll periodically sort of try to organize them. One thing that I like to do with students, and that I do myself, is, like, I kind of think of it as, I love to cook, and I also do a lot of visual art. Sorry, I have a little cold. And I at some point realized that I would never sit down to do an art project or go to cook a meal and not gather the things that I needed and sort of prep them and, like, have them available, even if it's things that, like, you're not going to use. And so I'll periodically go through and sort of, like, see if parts will fit into another part, and I'll sort of categorize them together. And then if I'm sitting down and I'm like, oh, I've got this one line that I love and I want to write a song around it, I might go through those items and pull out things that might be useful and sort of put them in, like, a usable place. Or I'll say, like, okay, well, I've got this phrase that I love, and I'll actually just go through and, like, write, like, rhyming words and related words and metaphors and similes and things that, like, match with it, that I can then just have on hand, just because once you just start to sort of, like, freely write, you can just be sort of, you can either, like, catch a glimpse of, like, oh wait, this will fit, and if you have that stuff available around you, it's, like, way easier. Or I'll do, like, a lot of research too, like, if I, like, I'll be like, oh, like, I've got this one idea for a song, and it's got this, like, I can't think of anything, but it'll, like, have, like, a scientific term or something in it, and, like, I'll, like, have a feeling about whatever that is, and so I'll just do, like, a ton of research about it and jot a bunch of things down and sort of have them on hand. And I won't use, like, 90% of it, but it's like I have a greater understanding of what it is I'm writing about, and can easily then, because, like, once you're in the part where you're, like, flowing with, like, writing, you don't want to have to stop and then go back and do that stuff.
Right, yeah.
Because it's, like, really hard then. You've, like, interrupted your flow. So it's just sort of, like, gathering all of the things that you might need. And then, like, what usually turns out is then you're like, oh, well, this riff doesn't really go, but now you've got, like, the potential for 2 songs.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so I use lyrics and things and riffs that I wrote, like, 10 years ago. Like, if something's good, I'll hang on to it forever. And then, like, one day you're like, and maybe even you write it into a song and you discard that song, but you know that one part was really good. And later, like, 10 years later, you're like, oh, wait, this is the song it belongs in. Because I always kind of think you're, like, I don't know, it's like time travel. Like, I think that creatively, like, when you're making music and writing, you're almost, I find that I'm, like, always, like, going back and being like, oh my gosh, I was, like, telling myself something that I didn't know yet, or that I was going to need to know in the future. And now it's, like, very, like, important. And now's the time.
Us,
Baby
like
band.
baby band songwriters. What would you? What is your priority tip for practicing songwriting?
Oh, that's a really good question, because I've found that one of the things that I really appreciate about having a classical music background is that there's a level of frustration around practice of any kind for people who didn't learn how to do it. And it's something that you then have to either love so much that you're just pouring every hour of your life into it, or that you teach yourself how to do. And there are so many benefits to it. One of them is that you end up like being a better musician, but the more important one is that you like learn how to move through frustration, and you learn how to like be okay with the fact that you're gonna write something or sing something or record a take that you hate, and you're gonna toss it, and it's fine, and it's gone, and you can move on, and you're not gonna like beat yourself up about it. And it's the same with writing. I would say that it's important to do the actual thing, even if you don't feel like it. That you don't. I think that there's a lot of mythology around like feeling inspired, but to me, like, so practice just means the act of doing something, and it doesn't mean that every single thing that you write down or record is going to be something that ends up being a song that you play in front of other people, but it also doesn't mean that it doesn't have any value to your practice of writing, because you're still thinking. The other thing is that I think it's really important to invest time in what other people might perceive as being lazy, because I know that when I have a huge project or something with a deadline, one of the first things that I'll do is like I might do a little bit of reading or research or something, or like gather a couple of thoughts, and then I'll like lie in bed and like think about it. And like seriously, like even things where it's like, even if like somebody was like, oh, we need you to write a song in an hour, I would probably spend the first 15 minutes lying in bed, just like not touching an instrument, not writing anything down, and just like letting my mind wander around it, because we don't do that enough. Like I feel like our culture not only doesn't value that, but like looks down on it, that like if you're not producing or if you're not looking busy, that it's not valuable. But I think that those moments that you can take to view other art or walk in nature or take a nap or meditate or exercise or whatever it is that you do that untethers your brain from having to like think about other specific things is really, really valuable. And then if you can move directly from that into some kind of just jotting down the things that you thought or writing, that's great, even if it's just like some quick note taking. But yeah, laziness is key.
Heck yeah. Phenomenal.
Take your naps,
Laziness
y'all.
is key.
Yes.
I want to put that on a t-shirt.
That's gonna be. This could go boom t-shirts.
Yeah,
it's like
laziness is key.
Let's go.
Well, and it's not really laziness.
No, it's not. No,
Yeah.
absolutely.
It's just a different type of activity.
Right.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't try to use the word lazy anymore because it's not a helpful descriptor.
It's not. It really isn't. And you know what? I was thinking that as I was saying it. I was trying to think like, well, what's a better way to describe this? And like, because it is. It's like there's like a stereotype of just like, oh, well, and like messy artists and like people like sleeping all day or whatever. And it's like when your brain is constantly like running.
Right.
It's really difficult to like settle it down for 2 minutes or 2 hours, like
totally. And you have to like go out and live life, and you have to observe things, and you have to like let that sink in, and you have to think about how those thoughts affect you personally, and how they affect the world, and how they affect your community, and just you have to just sort of like let all of that like resonate with you, and you need space and time to do that. That's, I think, like, sometimes I've had people ask me, like, well, what is it that artists need? Like, what, you know, if we could, like, provide artists with, like, some sort of service or something that would help them. And I'm always like, it's time. And I know that time often for all of us translates into money, because a lot of times if you're doing, like, gig work, it feels like you have to be constantly producing. Or if you're, you know, working, like, an hourly job and it doesn't pay that much, it's like practice, of course, but, like, time to do nothing, too, is just time that's your own. Is the single most important thing, I think, for creativity.
It's not dedicated to anything specific.
Yeah, and where you're not also, like, caretaking for other people.
Right,
Because that'll happen, and I feel like from what I've heard, this happens for women
far too frequently.
A lot. And I mean, like, of course, if you have, like, children or elderly people you're caring for, that is, like, a reality. But, like, a lot of people, I think, have a guilt associated with taking any time for themselves. Yeah. That could be spent caretaking either their home or other people's needs. And that time's just crucial for being creative.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you so much for talking with us. Thank you for the advice/therapy session. That was you got me right there. Oh yes, that was wonderful.
Right.
Yeah. Well, with Erin Frisby, thank you so much for talking with us. And the OSYX album is links above or below, whichever media platform you're on. Probably below. Maybe yes, most likely below. I don't know why I said above, because it's like
sometimes
from the gods. Like
I mean, it is a godsend.
Yeah,
You're not wrong.
Yeah.
A little link hunt.
Right.
We'll put it on the screen somewhere.
If you could watch a video, you could probably find a link.
Anyway, buy it, like, listen to it, just
Please
hear this
listen to
music.
it.
It is absolutely fantastic.
Wonderful. All right, and that is that.